Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings. I'm joined once again by Jacob Gibbs. This is the rookie running back preview part 2, and we're going to start immediately with a comment from YouTube. Brian, before the show even starts, let Jacob talk more, please. Love the show. I'll tell you what, if you want to hear Jacob talk more, this is the show for you. We are breaking down RB7 through 12 in the consensus running back rankings. We will talk about Devin Neal, RJ Harvey, Samson, Ollie Gordon, DJ Giddens, and more. We'll start, as we always do, with 3 questions for our guest, and we'll start with the and more. Gibbs, I want you to think about the names that we talked about last week on Friday, RB 1 through 6 in the class. We're doing 7 through 12 today. Who is your favorite back that we didn't talk about last week and we're not going to talk about later in the show?
Yeah, so Matt Waldman brought up 2 guys who would be my first 2 answers for like real life, and that's Damian Martinez and Taj Brooks. So it's almost like he's good at his job, that Waldman guy. My third answer would be Raheem Sanders, and he has gone completely forgotten. But he was 2 years ago, maybe like the back in the SEC in terms of like looking ahead to upcoming draft classes. He had some injuries, and they kind of tried to like reinvent his game, and that didn't go super well. But I thought towards the end of his time at South Carolina, he was really playing well. He's a guy who can contribute on all 3 downs. In fact, he tied Ashton Jeanty for the most avoided tackles throughout a career on receptions. Weird stat, but like he's fun. They call him Rocket Sanders. He's a big guy, but he does have some burst and he does have some wiggle. He can make people miss. His advanced stats are pretty good. And then, again, just like early breakout in the SEC, looked like a stud. And I think he's somebody who might end up going in like round 6 or something. Just a name to keep in mind. You can get him late in dynasty drafts. I think he has some juice still.
A 4.46 40 at 217 pounds, and the nickname Rocket. How could you go wrong with that? Question number 2. I'm viewing these backs, you mentioned with Sanders, maybe a round 6 guy. I'm viewing the backs that we're going to talk about today as likely day 3 picks. We talk a lot about draft capital and landing spot on this show, especially with the rookies. How much will it matter to you if one of these guys creeps into day 2, or on the other side, if one of these guys doesn't get drafted at all?
I'm sure there's research on it. I wish that I had the time to find it before we got started here. I feel like Ryan Heath of fantasypoints.com or like maybe JJ Zachariason of lateroundqb.com are your best bets to have answered that specific question with data already. Because it's a great question. It's important. It definitely feels important, the distinction between round 3 or undrafted. Like UDFAs, they can play themselves into a role, but it is a clear signal of a team's belief in a player if they use draft capital on them. And I do think that's important. The most recent example, just anecdotally, would be Kimani Vidal. He comes to mind. He was the 17th running back selected in 2024. And a lot of us, try to wish cast him into a potential role. And I'll throw my name into that because he did have really cool, advanced metrics and all of that. But the reality of the situation was, 17th running back selected. 5 teams decided to pass on him to take a different running back in round 5. The Chargers had 2 5th-round picks, didn't take him in round 5, and then eventually he gets picked in round 6. And then, we see even with multiple backfield injuries, he was minimally involved as a rookie. And so I do think it matters when a team like does or does not indicate belief in a player.
I think it will be really interesting on the other side of that question. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of backs taken in the second half of round 3 on day 2, and then a couple of backs taken early in round 4 on day 3. And we're going to have that whole evening of analysis and early Saturday morning where this back was a day 2 back and this guy isn't. And I do think that will maybe influence perception a little bit more than it will matter to me. Those cutoffs between pick 30 and pick 36, maybe not as big as they seem, or pick 90 and pick 106, not as big as they seem based on the cutoffs and when we start analyzing the players and how we view them as day 1, day 2, or day 3 picks. We're going to talk so much today specifically about individual players. I want to zoom out just a little bit at the top here, though, and just ask for question number 3. What do you think is the most important thing about running back evaluation?
My favorite attribute is contact balance, which I would classify as like a subset of my favorite trait, which is a running back's ability to create yardage on their own. If we're talking specifically for fantasy evaluation, then my answer would be an ability to contribute receptions. Scott Barrett of fantasypoints.com has detailed this for close to 10 years now. It's been known, and he updates the research. Even in non-PPR leagues, a reception is worth much more than a rush attempt. And so running backs who are able to get on the field for 3 downs just are going to accumulate more points, especially if you're playing in any sort of PPR format. So if you look at running backs from this class who can do both, can get on the field on passing downs, potentially play 3 downs, and can create yardage on their own, there's actually quite a few names. And there, there's a reason that people like this class so much. At the top, you clearly have Ashton Jeanty and Omarion Hampton who fit the bill in terms of being able to do both. A couple other sneakier ones are Devin Neal and Ollie Gordon, who were really, really productive collegiate backs, but have fallen down the board some. And I think that is fair because there are some, I have some questions about their ability to pick up yards after contact as an NFL player against NFL defenses, but they did it at a pretty good level at the collegiate level, and they definitely can play on passing downs. DJ Giddens, we're going to talk about him more later. He's definitely somebody who can do both. Some maybes are like Cam Scattaboo, Bhayshul Tuten, RJ Harvey. Those guys are all exciting, but there are pass protection concerns. RJ Harvey was asked to protect a lot in 2023. It didn't go particularly well, and they scaled that role back in 2024, and it went even worse. So, is he going to be just an early down guy? That maybe limits his fantasy appeal. But in terms of being able to create yards on their own, those guys are excellent. And if they are able to get on the field because they can create as, pass catchers out of the backfield, then we're looking at really exciting fantasy upside for guys you can get sort of later in your rookie drafts. Taj Brooks, that Walden brought up last week, definitely can do both. I don't know if it'll be at a high enough level for an NFL team to want to get him on the field all that often, but if he gets the opportunity, he can do both. He can create on his own, and he can play on passing downs. And then a sneaky name that we're going to get to later, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, can do both at a high level, I think. I'm really excited. We'll talk about him later.
I did not have that name on my bingo card for today's show. That's Jacob Gibbs. That's the first part of our show. We'll take a short break, and we will jump into RB7 through 12. She knows, and I know she knows. We are back, and we are starting with the consensus RB7 in the 2025 running back class. It's Devin Neal out of Kansas, and I'm going to be honest here at the start, Jacob. If we had done Friday's show based on Heath's preliminary top 6 and not the consensus top 6, Devin Neal would have been in that group. And there's probably a little bit of bias on my part. I've watched more Kansas Jayhawks football than I would care to admit. And Devin Neal's been doing this for a while, not a newcomer to the scene by any means in his last year. Makes huge explosive plays, and I think really maybe gets underrated a little bit in the passing game. So I'm super excited about Devin Neal. I, depending on landing spot, could have him as high as RB5 in this class. Where are you at on Neal, and what's the evaluation?
Yeah, so Neal, you hit on it. He's been very productive. Only Ashton Jeanty has more career PPR points from this class. But I do, you'll notice that I listed his career point total, not a per game number. We'll get to some massive per game producers here in a second. That wasn't Neal so much. He was an accumulator. And that's borne out in his advanced rushing data, middling avoided tackle rates. But that's definitely not the end all be all. I famously was worried about Saquon Barkley's avoided tackle rates for reference. And then he went nuts. Another great example is Travion Henderson has the 4th lowest career rate in terms of avoided tackles per rush among the running backs in this class. But so that you can still be productive even if you're not making people miss a lot or creating a ton of yards on your own. But Neal is not exactly the big play speed threat that Henderson or Saquon Barkley are, Right. So that does give me some concern. I do think that he has the quickness to make, one guy miss, like make a miss in a phone booth, that kind of thing. He's definitely got the lateral agility. But as an athlete, he is a little bit underwhelming. That shows up in his testing. And I do think it shows up on film. Another thing I would say about him is that while he can contribute on passing downs, he is a really natural and clean and smooth receiver. I think he might be like in the bottom half at least, if not even like the bottom third of this class as a rusher. And people are going to get up in arms. People really like Devin Neal. And I get it. He's a great player, great collegiate player, but like he's not as powerful as I think he should be for somebody with his build. He's 5'11", 211, 215, something like that. But he had the 5th lowest rushing success rate on short yardage runs. So what I'm talking about there, success rate on the first 2 downs, if you get half of the yardage required to get a first down, that's a success. On 3rd and 4th down, if you get a first down, that's a success. And then it just goes into this cumulative stat success rate. Short yardage runs are when 3 or fewer yards are needed. He wasn't very good on those, and I do think that shows up in a lack of contact balance and leg drive that a lot of running backs in this class have in spades. There are some really strong, more compact running backs. Neal doesn't quite have that. And so I do wonder like what his role will be in the NFL. It feels like it might just be a career backup. I don't know. Like the NFL, it feels like the running back position is about to be really stacked in the NFL where there's like 40 or 45 running backs who are good. And if most teams are going to have a guy who's better at getting those extra yards that you need than Neal, I don't know what his role will be. But he's definitely intriguing. He's a really complete player.
You think he's a little bit more dependent on landing on a team that doesn't have one of those rushers right now? Because we know, like you say, 40 or 45. There's already, I think we would say, a handful up to 10 teams that may have 2 of those guys. And there's going to be some teams that already have one, and maybe it's an older one, like a 29 or 30-year-old running back, and they're going to add a rookie. If Neal, let's say, I'll give you a hypothetical landing spot, lands, he's the first running back Denver takes in round 4. And now he's just competing with those guys and not with the other 40 running backs in the NFL. Does that landing spot make a big difference for him?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Denver is the ideal landing spot for running backs, especially if it's a running back who can contribute as a pass catcher.
Mm-hmm.
That would be if he gets the Sean Payton vote of confidence and they don't have much else that they add, then it's like, yeah, push him up the board for sure. In that situation, he's like, I think you could put him close to round 1 in Dynasty startups, like for sure. He definitely has the skill set to play all 3 downs. And at the end of the day, I mean, Joe Mixon has shown us for year after year after year, if you're playing all 3 downs in the NFL, you're probably going to be productive for fantasy.
Neal has, it seems to me, like a skill set that coaches may like a little bit more than fantasy managers. He seems to be at least adequate in pass protection, maybe even good, and absolutely no ball security concerns. I know somebody in the chat had said, I see David Montgomery when I look at Neal, and I think you'd probably balk at that maybe a little bit because of the tackle avoidance that Montgomery was just exceptional at in college. But one thing that guys like Montgomery and even Jamal Williams before him in Detroit, there are coaches that really just like the guy who does what he's supposed to do. You think it's a good description of Neal?
Yeah, Montgomery is so much better, I think, as a strong runner and a contact balance guy, and being able to get those short yardage runs that you need. Right. I think the comparison for Neal would be like Devin Singletary, but not as elusive. But like that is kind of the fact that you're alluding to. Like coaches have definitely loved Singletary, and he's gotten on the field everywhere he's went.
That will do it for Devin Neal, who again is my RB5 or 6 in the class right now. He's currently RB7 in the consensus rankings. Landing spot's going to matter a lot for him. Jacob thinks, he may be just a backup running back in the NFL, but in the right opportunity, he could definitely move up draft boards. Let's get to RB8 in the class. And I think I saw you tweeting about this guy either last night or this morning, RJ Harvey out of UCF.
Yeah, I love RJ Harvey. He's a hilarious guy to follow up Neal because they're just complete opposites. RJ Harvey's strength is his weakness. If he shows up to the interview and they ask what his weakness is, he can say that I'm always trying to, create more than there is there. And it's true. He's always trying to maximize every situation and make a big run happen. And that's borne out in the data, like when met at or behind the line of scrimmage, he had the third highest stuffed rate. And so stuff is qualified as a run that gains 0 or negative yardage. So third highest stuffed rate in the class on runs where initial contact was met at the line of scrimmage, but he had one of the highest yards after contact per rush rates on those runs. And so he does create big plays on those runs quite often, but he's also taking negative plays. And so the question is, can he be somebody like Bucky Irving, where like that's the player that people like to compare him to? Can he do that at a efficient enough clip that he can continue to get on the field, or is he just going to annoy his coach? Because like if he can't pass protect and he's taking negative plays and he's not like producing enough huge explosive plays, then he might be somebody who just goes away. But yeah, I absolutely loved his film. To me, he reminds me of a hybrid of like Bucky Irving and Tyjae Spears, who are two guys who I'm enamored with because they can create yards on their own. Very, very elusive, contact balance, all of it. Really, really like RJ Harvey.
And as you said, kind of the opposite of Neal, has had some problems in pass protection, has had some problems with ball security. Dynasty Dave in the chat says it sounds like Kenneth Walker. When you're I know what he's talking about with that. It's an all or nothing type thing. You'll get the big plays, but you'll also get a lot of runs for negative yardage. I assume though it's a much lesser version of Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Kenneth Walker is pretty special. If you just watch him, like there's not very many guys where it's like, oh, he reminds me of Kenneth Walker, because he's insane, the stuff he can do. But I mean, Harvey was really, really productive, and his avoided tackle rates, his yards after contact are really, really good. If you look at the highest PPR point per game averages as a starting running back for a career, it's Ashton Genty, 27.7, Cam Scatteraboo, 24.5, and then Harvey is next, 23.2, above Amarian Hampton, above Dylan Sampson, and some of these other really good running backs. So I think if he were to, like say the Jaguars draft Harvey and he is now, the Bucky Irving paired up with Liam Cohen and he gets to emulate that role, I absolutely think he could like work his way into a very fantasy relevant role there.
So that's interesting because I think that's somebody, and I hope Jacksonville doesn't draft a running back because I'm having a hard enough time figuring out how they're going to employ Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. But how would you, I think like Etienne was a first round pick. How would you compare him to Bigsby though?
Bigsby, they effectively do kind of the same thing, but they do it in a different way. I prefer Harvey, the way that he wins. But Bigsby has the ability to like create extreme rushing efficiency, as we saw last year. The other difference is that Harvey can really contribute on passing downs, whereas like they seem to not want Bigsby on the field on passing downs under any circumstances.
So we talked about the potential problems as a pass blocker, but you feel Harvey, just as a receiver, could have a lot of success.
For sure. Yeah, he's really natural as a receiver, produced well as a receiver when given opportunities. Yeah.
And we see here, Thomas, if you're watching on YouTube, highlighting some of Gibbs' tweets about RJ Harvey. He does seem to have a lot of advanced stats that really put him into some elite company. Is Harvey the type of running back that the true media view is a little bit more complimentary to him than the film is?
Well, I think there's a ton of people who watch his film and are in love with him for sure. But like, yeah, absolutely. If you look at any of these advanced stats, the one we've got on the screen here is highest career rushing EPA per snap was RJ Harvey. But that is sort of a team level stat. And I did think that his offensive environment was conducive to success. A lot of these running backs don't have the benefit of playing with a coordinator who's like putting them in position to maximize their skill set. He did, so like if he were to go to Liam Cohen, like it would be, kind of like what we saw in college, and we've already seen him win in this role. We'll talk about Dylan Sampson. There are teams that like really take advantage of the rules and the wider hashes at the collegiate level and spread things out. And RJ Harvey was absolutely one of those backs for sure. But I mean, I do think it shows up on film that he's very, very elusive. He's very hard to tackle.
You talked about how Neal landing in Denver without much competition might elevate him into borderline round one consideration. Would you say the same for Harvey?
Yeah, I think so. I would if he was, I like the fit for Neal in Denver better because I
Right.
trust him as a pass protector. If Harvey were to land in Denver, I would wonder if that might be more of a bit role,
Right.
where Peyton sees him more as like an 8 to 12 touch guy. Whereas like I think we could legitimately see him push up to like 15-ish touches like Bucky did last year if he was with Cohen or someone like that.
That is RJ Harvey out of UCF. We are moving on and moving right along to RB9 in the class, Bhayshul Tuten. This was the guy out of Virginia Tech that he's got one of those names that you just got to ask. But I have seen plenty of people talking about him on social media. What's your eval on Tuten?
Yeah, I mean, just like Harvey, he's an easy guy to fall in love with, and there's no surprise that there are a lot of people on social media who have. And because he has the advanced statistics and he has awesome film, he's similar to Harvey in some ways for sure, especially statistically. So like like Harvey, really took a lot of negative plays, but also created a lot of yards when there was nothing there. He had the lowest success rate on short yardage runs, the stat that I brought up earlier with Neal. And so I think that makes sense when you watch him. He can be a bit indecisive, and I think his vision can be a bit of a concern. But I also see him at times like when he's not overthinking things, and I think he has a really natural feel for space. So I do think he could improve on those things. But if you just look at what happened, he did have the lowest success rate on short yardage runs. He had the second highest stuffed rate on runs where initial contact with the defender came at or behind the line of scrimmage, but the fourth highest yards after contact on those runs. So similar to Harvey, more top line speed, which by the way, Harvey is fast. I brought him up as like a Bucky Irving comparison, but he's like a tick faster than Irving for sure. He can really make explosive plays. Tuten, obviously the fastest in the class, and that shows up on film. He gets downhill so fast, and it's hilarious, some of these runs, because like the defensive backs aren't even ready for him to get to the second level of the speed that he does, and it just becomes this collision where everybody's like rolling. He's extremely fast, and he also can like shift and change gears while he's like near top speed. I also think he can contribute as a receiver. He's another guy who I worry about his pass protection. He really didn't get to do it very often at the collegiate level, but he was used as a pass catcher out of the backfield. So he's really, really exciting. He's like second or third in career avoided tackle rate. Ashton Genty is the only one with a higher avoided tackle rate than Tuten. And so it's like, if you can avoid tackles at such a high rate and you have that top line speed, you're a big play waiting to happen at any time.
Friend of the show, Fantasy Football Mad Scientist, is in the chat. Says Tuten seems like a prototypical Miami or San Francisco running back, outside zone speedster type.
Yeah, that seems to be the fit. I do think that he could become somebody who can be a man gap runner as well, and like can win in a lot of different ways. But it's been inconsistent so far in that aspect. So I do think at the very least we know that he can get to the edge and create huge plays.
So is he in the category where the style of a team's offense is going to impact your view of him early on?
Yeah. And also, I mean, the size is a real concern. Like, we don't know that he'll be anything more than like a Matt Breida type or something like that. I think there's potential for him to be much more. But yeah, if he lands in a spot where it's good draft capital and there you can see a logical path to him getting double-digit touches, he's going to be pushing up into that like early round 2 range, potentially even back into round 1 if you just like really, really want to get him. I think he's really pretty similar to Cam Scatterboot. Like, he doesn't have the size that Scatterboot does, but like in a lot of ways his profile is really similar.
I want to separate out these first 3 backs we've talked about here, Neal, Harvey, and Tuten. And I'll just kind of have you rank these 3 guys in a couple of different categories. Actually, let's just start with, what order would you put the 3 in? Are they kind of in the same tier in terms of how you view them going into the draft?
Yeah, so I'm hesitant to even do rankings because I'm still really early in the analytics side of things, because like honestly, Heath, I can't stop freaking watching running back film. I've watched like 150 games and I keep watching more. People keep being like, you need to watch this guy, and then I watch him and he's awesome, and so I keep falling down the rabbit hole. Like I've got so many guys I still like need to get a more complete view of the class analytically. which is hilarious because like a couple of years ago, that was like, I never would have imagined that I would be here with the film side of things, but it's been really, really fun. I'll do my best here. And I think I would put Neal ahead of the other two, unless you are in a position where you are like really looking for something to just provide a lightning bolt to your team. Like maybe you didn't perform well, or you think you're a couple of years away or a year away or something like that. But if you hit on a few things, then it could like put you into contending. In which case I would go after Harvey. I think that he could be like the guy who comes in and is a league winner for you right away. And like drastically changes his value, his perceived dynasty value right away. I think I do put Tuten as the lowest. I think he's the least likely to get double-digit touches per game. But he definitely has really exciting upside as well.
Well, that was kind of the way it seems to me. And Neal is more likely than the other two to have a starter's workload at some point, but the other two are more exciting than Neal if they get the starter's workload. Would you say that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the reason I was like hesitant is like I want to look at running backs who profile similar to these guys and just form a more complete idea of like how likely is it that Harvey does matter, that he does get a chance. You know what I mean? When you look at other running backs who profiled similarly, how likely is it that we do see him work his way into a role? And my guess is that we're going to find it's much more likely that someone like Devin Neal, who had a career like Devin Neal, gets that opportunity, even if their advanced metrics don't jump off the page.
I know you're early in the process, so we're going to let you change your opinion in May if you want to. But as I look at these guys and we talk about, the upside is maybe they get into early round 2 or late round 1. That's right in the same area right now in rookie drafts where I'm seeing the top 2 or 3 tight ends, depending on how you rank those guys, coming off of the board. Barring something surprising happening with these guys, like sneaking into day 2, you view these guys as behind Tyler Warren, behind Colston Loveland?
Yeah, clearly. I'm higher on these tight ends than consensus than it sounds like.
So those are more surefire first round picks. These are guys that are probably round 2, could fall to round 3, or could creep up into the 1-2 turn.
Yeah, if we're talking tight end premium, like definitely, yeah.
Right. Well, and yeah, that tight end premium, I think for sure everybody's got them in the top 6, but yeah, they're right at that 1-2 turn if it's not tight end premium. Let's get to RB10 in the consensus rankings. You referenced him earlier, Dylan Samson. What's the eval?
He's exciting. So I mentioned, the point per game averages. He was 5th in point per games as a starting running back. One of just 5 running backs who averaged above 20 points per game. And that I bring that up because he is younger than all of these running backs.
I love that.
Yeah. And so that's pretty exciting. I don't know if he's going to be able to play on all 3 downs, but in 2024, he was used 118 times as a pass blocker. The only running back who has a higher single season number. This is total, so it is affected by the number of dropbacks for the team. But Quint Allen is the only one with a higher total number of pass blocking snaps in a season, and his pressure rate allowed was pretty good, definitely below average, which is good. And so, like, there's some path to him being somebody who can play on all 3 downs. He is a bit undersized for that type of running back, but he's over 200 pounds. So he's not, he's bigger than some of these other running backs we've seen recently who have been able to play more than expected on all 3 downs. He can make people miss. He's got crazy burst. He can turn any play into a touchdown. He's really exciting. I alluded to it earlier, but the stats do back this up. The system that he played in affected things for him. So 54% of his runs in 2024 came versus light boxes, which means there's 6 or fewer defenders at the line of scrimmage. That was the highest rate in the class. For comparison, on the low end, Caleb Johnson's rate was 23%. We talked about, with Matt Waldman, the offense there at Iowa really affects things. Way more under center running there. Samson ran almost entirely out of the shotgun. 41% was the average for 2025 prospects. So he definitely benefited from the offensive design. But I do think that he's got the skill set to project it. I don't want to get like go overboard with taking him like in the mid first round or anything like that. But if you can get him at a spot where you're comfortable, I think it's a pretty comfortable projection because he's really, I mean, if you just watch him, he's really electric.
So I don't give away too much of Matt Waldman's rookie scouting portfolio on the show because I think you guys should all go buy it and read it because you'll get smarter about these backs. But I will say, when you look at Waldman's rankings, Samson is ahead of everybody we've talked about so far. Samson is ahead of 3 of the guys that we talked about on Friday. If he does get that starter's workload in the right situation, do you think this is a guy who could be a top 15, top 20 dynasty running back?
Yeah, I think you can definitely make that projection with Samson. In my head, he is ahead of all of these guys. I thought that the consensus was that he was ahead of Scadaboo as well. But I don't really keep up with where people are ranked, honestly.
Well, and at this point, when you're talking about consensus and we don't have draft capital, it is all really just like, I like this guy. So I think there's tiers. Nobody's probably going to move ahead of Ashton Genty at any point in this class. But when we're talking about RB 7 through 12, I think one of these guys could jump into the top 5 and it wouldn't be that surprising. And one of these guys could end up going undrafted and it might be disappointing, but it wouldn't be that surprising. I feel like we've taken pretty optimistic case for Samson other than the size, which is not like 5'8", 200 or just over 200. That's big enough. What are the other concerns that you have for
him? He goes down a little bit easier than I would like. It's sort of like Neal. I think his contact balance is better than Neal, but he doesn't run super strong. We don't have a ton of opportunities to have seen him on film have a lot of congestion and contact to deal with. It's often getting him out in space. But I do wonder if he were drafted into a system or an offensive environment where the line is just getting blown up, if he just isn't able to do much. But I mean, there's very few running backs who are going to be able to make much of a situation like that, honestly. I'm pretty excited about him. I don't see any clear glaring weaknesses.
We did have somebody brought up the fumbling in the chat, and I noticed in Waldman's write-up that his ball security was graded lower than several of the players in this class. And that, again, that's another thing that fantasy managers probably just yawn when they get those -2 points. Coaches do seem to number, and some coaches really, we remember what Bill Belichick used to be. So it's really just dependent on the coach and whether we're going to punish a guy right away. I think we saw Tyrone Tracy get punished for it for a little bit last year.
Yeah, no, that could be a thing for sure. That's a good note.
Let's take our second break, and then we'll get to RB 11, RB 12, and Jacob's favorite sleepers. RB 11 is a guy that honestly I've not thought a whole lot about so far this year. I'm not sure who the Ollie Gordon guy is that's moving him up in the rankings, but Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State is the number 11 running back in the consensus rankings. What's your take on Gordon?
I don't really understand the discrepancy between Ollie Gordon and Raheem Sanders when it comes to ranking. To me, they're sort of similar in that they were really successful, which would be fair. Gordon's season was bigger than Sanders.
Led FBS in rushing.
Yeah. In 2023, Ollie Gordon went nuts. And that, I don't mean to take anything away from him, but 2024 left us with some questions in the same way that Sanders' career kind of dwindled off for various reasons. For Gordon, the reasons were pretty clear. It was that the team really struggled. They lost I think it was 9 straight games or something to close out the season. They just couldn't get anything going. And the offensive line was a problem. There was just clear penetration to the backfield often. And it was clear that Gordon was the focal point of the offense, and teams were able to slow him down. But yeah, I think there's enough optimism because of what he did in 2023 that it's keeping him afloat in this range. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be getting any Ollie Gordon at this price. So I've watched a lot of him over the last couple of days because when I initially watched him, I didn't like it. I felt pretty underwhelmed, but I wanted to because he's in this range with a lot of guys that I do really like, I wanted to just make sure that I felt good about that evaluation. Because sometimes it's like I watch him around, RJ Harvey and Samson and people who I really like, and then he just like doesn't, and it's not really fair to the guy. So I wanted to give him a fair evaluation. So here's what I think about Ollie Gordon. I said this on Twitter. It really cracks me up. He runs the way that I imagined Travion Henderson might run before I got into this process. I don't really pay attention. I just don't really have time to watch college football during the season. And so my process starts like January, February, somewhere in there. I start really getting into these guys. And when I say that, it's that he's very light feet. He is like he's like running on his toes, which is hilarious because he's a huge guy. And then Henderson honestly kind of runs the way that I thought Ollie Gordon might run, where he's just like trying to really run people over, run right through guys. And then that's sort of borne out in the stats for Gordon. He had the 4th lowest success rate on short yardage runs throughout his career, which definitely was influenced by the 2024 season where teams are loading, the box against them. But I also did feel like there were, even dating back to 2023, I watched a bunch of his film over the last few days. I did feel like there was a lack of power and leg drive in those situations. I also question his vision. Him and Devin Neal are 2 of the hardest ones for me, because I know a lot of people really, really think that they're just great players and like almost like everything about their game is great. But when I watched these 2, like I thought both of them had questionable vision. They're missing cutback lanes. They're overrunning things. And Gordon, it was not just the 2024 season. Like it feels like sometimes he commits to something and he just is like missing where the run is flowing to naturally. And then when you see some of these stats where he looks middling or even like lower in the class, I don't know. It makes sense that it kind of adds up, but
it needs to be in a gap heavy scheme.
I think that makes sense, especially with the way that he likes to run. Yeah, I need to do the research on schematic stuff to know for sure. I haven't looked into that for him. I just want to say I threw a lot of cold water on Gordon, but on the positive side, he was on the field for 80% of passing downs in 2023. Only LaQuint Allen had a higher single season rate from running backs in this class. So the potential for him to play a 3-down role is legitimately there. I, a couple days ago, sent out a tweet where I tried to group the running back class into tiers categorically, not based off of like overall talent or anything like that. And there was a sub tier to like 3-down skill sets that I called maybe we can run an offense through this running back. And it was Quinshon Judkins, Damian Martinez, and Ollie Gordon. I think that matters. Like if a team just decides to turn him into Najee Harris or whatever, which he kind of honestly reminds me of Najee Harris in some ways, that's been somebody you can use for fantasy, even if he's not, if I don't think he's some elite vision, contact balance guy. So I don't want to, there's no reason to overreact to my evaluation and think that he's not a good player, because if an NFL team proves that they don't buy that, that's what matters.
You mentioned Najee. I was kind of thinking as you were describing him, and except for the tiptoes part, because when I think of a tiptoe runner, I think of somebody that can't decide where they're going. It sounds more like he is the play is called to go to this hole. I am going to run to this hole. It sounds, but he's also really good in pass protection. Is it a little bit like not Ezekiel Elliott last year, but maybe 2 or 3 years ago when Tony Pollard was making all the big plays, but when they needed to go get 3 yards, you give it to Zeke. When you need a pass block, you put Zeke in the game.
Something like that. I don't think he's as decisive as Zeke though, or as powerful. Yeah. I honestly think like what we saw last year with Najee Harris is kind of what I felt. It just immediately reminded me of that. I watched a weird amount of Najee Harris last year because it completely changed his running style and just started trying to create big plays a lot and like almost avoid contact, which is not what he was coming into the NFL for sure. That's sort of who Ollie Gordon reminds me of.
Let's get to RB12 in the 2025 running back class. It is DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. Is this a full-time player in the NFL?
Potentially, yeah. He had a route rate of 55% or higher in 2 seasons. So he ran a route on over half, 55% or higher of the total dropbacks in 2 separate seasons. Devin Neal and LaQuint Allen are the only others in this class who did that. He was on the field for 67% of the team's passing snaps overall in games he was a starter throughout his career. That's the highest rate in the class. So I definitely think he can play all three downs. I think he looks natural as a pass catcher, and I think he can create when he gets out in space. He was ninth in the class in career avoided tackle rate, and he has speed. It does show up on his film sometimes, and it definitely showed up in his testing. He's got size as well. I don't think he plays quite to his size in terms of strength, but he's an intriguing athlete and somebody who can play on all three downs. And so it's sort of like Devin Neal. If he lands in a spot where, it looks like, if he lands in Denver, then that would be really exciting. But I think anywhere that he lands, if the starter were to go down, then he could step in and potentially be a guy who you're using for fantasy and is like a top 12, top 15 running back if he's getting all the touches.
So it's interesting. Usually I think when people ask, can he be a full-time player, they're asking about the receiving work. I actually felt more confident in Giddens as a pass catcher. I wasn't sure he was going to be an early downs rusher.
I think that's fair. Some of he did have a high success rate in short yardage situations. There wasn't quite as large of a sample size as somebody like Cam Scadaboo or whatever, or Raheem Sanders. Those guys are really good in those situations over a larger sample size. But I liked what I saw from Giddens as a runner. He wasn't I think sort of like Gordon and Neal, it was a bit underwhelming relative to guys like Harvey, who I fell in love with. But I do think that he kind of reminds me of Tyrone Tracy. I think he could be somebody who makes the most of the opportunities that he gets, even if he's not creating a ton outside of that.
Let's run through a couple of quick superlatives for RB 7 through 12, and then I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Jacob's favorite sleepers, because he said on Twitter that he had 15 of them. I think that was an exaggeration. I hope that was an exaggeration. Best of the six backs that we have talked about today, best receiving profile.
I think we have to give it to Giddens. What do you mean receiving? Do you mean ability to overall contribute on passing downs, or ability to create as a receiver?
Let's forget about the blocking for a second. Let's just talk about as a receiver.
Well, then I think I might actually go with Tuten, because I really think that he could be somebody who can get him in the screen game, get him out on swing passes, and when he gets out in space, it could just be a touchdown anytime. He's really good at making one guy miss. Like I had said at the top, second highest avoided tackle rate in the class. And then with his speed, he can just be dangerous, man.
Most likely to produce a top 12 fantasy season.
I'm going to go with Dylan Samson.
Okay. Just based on that was your favorite guy. And if everything goes right, he has the abilities to get that done. Most likely to go undrafted in a couple weeks.
Oh, gosh.
You think all these guys are it's just none of them are actually that likely to go undrafted?
Yeah, I would be really surprised if any of them go undrafted. I guess I think it would be Ollie Gordon or RJ Harvey.
Right.
If people just think that if the 2024 season really scares people off of Gordon, or if the Harvey stuff just seems like it was a fluke, he's an older running back. If people just don't buy it, yeah, man, if any of these guys go undrafted, that'll really be a bummer.
Well, that's the thing. We talked about six backs that we think could get drafted on the first 2 days. We've now talked about the consensus 7 through 12, which are not Matt Waldman's 7 through 12 by any stretch of the imagination. They're not necessarily your 7 through 12. We're getting ready to talk about some backs that you might like more than a couple of these guys. So are we just, I think that the stage is set for someone to not get drafted, or maybe it's just somebody we think's getting drafted on day 2 falling to round 6. Let's jump into Jacob Gibbs' favorite sleepers. You already gave us one name earlier in the show. We had the names from Matt Waldman, obviously, that were not ranked in 1 through 6 on Friday that are in his 1 through 6. And again, if you didn't hear that show, go listen to it. But who are your other favorite sleepers in this class?
Okay, yeah, there's tons of them. So I am going to limit it to, I'm just going to give you 4 more. I gave you Sanders, but we'll limit it to 5. But first, I want to play a game. I'm going to name a running back prospect. You tell me if you've ever heard the name before. No shame. If
this seems like there's going to be shame, but go ahead.
If anything, the shame is mine for spending my time this way. So Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, I named at the top of the show. Have you heard that one?
Right. I have now. Yeah.
This is the first time. Okay. What about Kylan James?
No.
Yeah. I mean, he barely played. He literally never played more than 50% of the snaps in a game. But people are on Twitter telling me to watch Kylan James highlights, and I did, and they're pretty freaking cool. He's like 220 pounds, runs in the 4.4s, has a higher career avoided tackle rate than Ashton JJ.
He was fantastic.
He was a part-time back at UNLV. He's really, we'll see if he gets drafted, but could be a good runner for sure. What about Kyle Monangai? I think is maybe how you say this name.
I have definitely seen that name.
Okay. Yeah. I love this guy. He's really, really compact, really quick. He has unbelievably small hands. I think he has the second smallest hands of any player to ever go into the combine, if I am remembering that correctly. But what I really love about him is feet. He's just like really, really shifty, really, really always like amazing contact balance. He's really fun. He might not get drafted, but he's really fun to watch. Montrell Johnson Jr. from Florida.
Yes.
Yeah. But I don't even know if he's going to get drafted. He ran a 4.4. He's big. He ran a 4.4. He was productive, over 3,000 career yards. He's outside the top 20 running backs in most rankings. Marcus Yarns of the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens.
You know, thankfully, the names you're going with now were surprisingly higher in Waldman's rankings than they were.
Yeah, okay.
So
that makes
if you'd given me this test a week and a half ago before I had the RSP, the answer probably would have been no.
Yeah, 4.45 receiving upside. Fighting Blue Hens, no G. Fighting Blue Hens. Lan Larison. Have you heard of Lan Larison, Heath?
Somebody put his name in the chat 2 minutes before you said it. Thank you, Ricky.
Yeah, people are putting his name in the chat. He has some. I'm seeing highlights on Twitter where he's making one-handed catches. He's just blowing by guys, mossing guys. I don't know. He's 6 foot, receiving running back. I need to get to him, but he's another small school guy. I don't know. This class is just so fun, and I really hope that some of these guys do emerge and end up mattering, because it's been really fun digging into all of them. Okay. So my sleepers, Raheem Sanders at the top. 4 more. Jadon Blue for Texas, 4.38 speed, and it definitely shows up on film. He has a lot of rushing metrics that are intriguing, and he can contribute as a receiver for sure. So he's somebody who, if he gets in, like a Miami situation, he honestly does kind of remind me of Devon Achane, which is, not a name that you should be comparing people to. But he's shifty and creative with the way that he manipulates space, which, like, if you are able to do that and you're this fast, it could be really, really exciting. And he's legitimately like one of the better receiving profiles in the class. Okay, we need to talk about Ja'Cory.
That was Jadon Blue.
Yeah.
And now let's talk about Ja'Cory.
Yeah, we need to talk about Ja'Cory. So, trusted as a pass blocker. I mentioned that DJ Giddens had the second most it was Dylan Samson had the second most single season pass blocking snaps. He tied with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. And Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt did that in 2023 at New Mexico. He then transferred to Arizona for 2024, went for 100 yards and a touchdown in his first game, and then didn't play the rest of the season because of eligibility issues that dated back to 2019. I don't understand how there could be confusion on that before the year and no one knew until like one game into the season, but that's what happened. So he didn't get to play the rest of the year. He's old. But if you take his 2023 and 2024 data where he was playing at like bigger schools, it's elite. It's really, really elite as a rusher, and he can play on passing downs. 35% avoided tackle rate across those 2 seasons on 200-ish rush attempts. Really strong yards after contact, almost 4 yards after contact per rush. And his light box face was one of the lowest rates in this prospect class. He actually was like running into heavy boxes quite often, especially at New Mexico, because I think people knew like he was the offense. He's got size, he's got speed. He is a name to know, and he's somebody I didn't even know until a couple of weeks ago. But then the people on X who are like even sicker than I am about this stuff are like, you need to watch him. You need to watch Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. And I'm glad that they said that, because he's awesome.
So that's a pretty positive evaluation. What's the reason he's not higher in the consensus rankings or when people talk about running backs?
I mean, he might not get drafted. And he's old. And he's just easy. He's just got lost in the shuffle. The sample size is small of him producing against high level competition. But yeah, if you just look at like the intangibles, if you watch the film, like all of the boxes kind of are checked in terms of like what you might be looking for a playmaking running back. We'll see if teams believe in it.
We should have 2 more if my math is correct.
Yes, you are. Jordan James, more efficient than Bucky Irving when they shared a backfield at Oregon, and then he went on to post 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns after Bucky's departure. So he really benefited from the offensive system for sure. Oregon's offense is just really conducive to success at the running back position. He was one of the most sensitive to stacked boxes in the entire class in terms of how much stacked boxes negatively affected his rushing efficiency relative to his carries versus non-stacked boxes. So I don't want to get carried away with his rushing efficiency because he was literally the most efficient running back of any back that had over 100 carries in 2023. It definitely was impacted by Oregon's offense. But if you watch the film, he is just really good at like taking what's there. It's funny, like he was a perfect like thunder to lightning complement for Bucky Irving. Bucky is like kind of running into the RJ Harvey stuff a little bit where he's getting a little carried away with it, like trying to make something when maybe there's nothing there and sometimes it's a negative play. This guy is no nonsense, like not doing that at all, just like plugging the hole and doing it over and over and over. He sort of reminds me of Jordan Mason. I don't know if he maybe has as much like make you miss ability as Mason, but when I watched him, that's who I thought of. He's short, compact running back with a lot of power.
Well, and we've seen Jordan Mason early on in his career did not do a whole lot as a pass catcher, showed a little bit more in that regard last year, but still only caught 11 passes in 12 games. And I think that's kind of the question that I have for James. Fundamentally, is he going to be okay as a pass catcher?
I don't know. I didn't really see it on film, and I don't think it's in his data really that much either. So my guess is he's just kind of an early down guy.
Right. An early down guy and probably a day 3 pick. But I would say, like, it seems like some of the other guys we've talked about are less likely to get drafted than he is. Somebody's probably going to take a shot on Nick Jacobs.
Yeah. Some people, I think it might have been Dane Brugler. I don't know for sure, but some people really like him. I think it might have been Dane Brugler had him as like a top 5 running back from this class. Like he's, I think, definitely higher on the board than most of these guys.
Right. And sleeper number 5.
Corey Kiner, and I need now to apologize to Kyle Monangai, I think is who I attributed the small hands to. It's actually this guy. There's so many running backs in this class, and I get them mixed up. I'm pretty sure it's this guy who has small hands but awesome feet. This guy, Corey Kiner, is really, really fun to watch. Amazing contact balance, quickness, and ability to set things up and get people where they're just not in the right position to make the tackle and create yards after contact. That was really, really important for him at Cincinnati because the offense was often dysfunctional. And so it was reliant on him to manipulate space. And he did it at a really high level, I thought, like where it's like he's sort of controlling what happens with like 21 other guys on the field in terms of the setting of the blocks and the defense with his movements. And he has to do that because he's not very fast either. I think he ran a 4.57, but he does it at a high level. He's really intriguing to me. It's sort of like a Taj Brooks kind of profile, except that he doesn't have the pass blocking and the ability to play on third downs. He seems like he's only an early down guy. So maybe like a Tyler Algier or something like that. It'll depend on where he gets drafted. But one difference between him and Algier is he has a much higher avoided tackle rate. And I think that shows up in his lateral quickness is better than Algier, but he also has power. He's pretty big.
We talked about 9 running backs fairly extensively on Friday's show. We just talked about 11 more, and I think Jacob said 4 other names when he was trying to play the Let's Embarrass Heath game. This is an incredibly deep running back class. As you can tell, we are very excited about it. Jacob Gibbs, thank you for your participation in both the running back preview part 1 and part 2.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. I'm going to see the Royals today. Wanted to let you know that, Heath. Very excited for that. Just a great time to be alive. We got Royals baseball. We got NFL draft coming up. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize for the Let's Embarrass Heath game, because Heath, before I jumped on this podcast, brought up the freaking 101 trade again. I basically traded away Ashton Ginty for Dalton Kincaid without knowing it. It's in a league where you start 2 tight ends, so Kincaid is much more valuable. But yeah, I messed up. I messed up big time. And now Heath is going to get Ashton Ginty because of it. Or maybe he's going to get Devon Achane from me. We'll see.
And I just want you to know what a good friend I am, because I'm not even going to correct you about the other player that was involved in that trade for Dalton Kincaid. I'm just going to let you go back and look at it and ruminate on that until our rookie draft. He's Jacob Gibbs. I'm Heath Cummings. Thank you to Thomas Schaefer. Quick programming note: there will not be a show on Friday this week. I am headed up to Memphis to do some work with St. Jude, get ready for the draft-a-thon and help us raise some money for them. We will be back on Tuesday. We'll be starting with wide receiver part 1 with the Couch Scouts. Wide receiver 2 part 2 is next Friday. We will talk to you on Tuesday.